most honest part of my divorce story is this. I didn't discover my wife's affair. Someone else couldn't carry it anymore and handed it to me. With distance, that detail matters because it explains the tone of everything that followed. There was no thrill of catching her, no sense of victory, just a quiet shift from one reality to another, and the slow work of making children didn't pay for adults' choices more than they already had. Back then, I was a scaffolding safety inspector. I spent my days walking building sites in a hard hat and high vis, checking tie points and load limits, signing off on work other people assumed was fine until it wasn't. It trained my brain to look for stress where others saw normal, the wrong angle, the repeated shortcut, the thing that holds until it doesn't. My wife, Nia, was an audiologist at a private clinic. She was good at her job, patient, steady, reassuring. People came in frustrated and embarrassed and left feeling heard in more ways than one. It was the kind of work that gave her an identity, and I respected that. We had 3 children then. Jude was 19 and already living half in the world and half at home. Part-time work, mates, a life that didn't ask permission. Lottie was 14, watchful in that teenage way that sees everything but chooses carefully what to say. And Ben was 6, still small enough to want his socks chosen for him, still trusting enough to believe the adults had the map. My father had died years earlier. My mother, Elaine, was still alive, sharp, practical, the kind of woman who didn't ask how you felt until she'd made sure you'd eaten. I had one older sister, Priya, who'd always been the calm one in our family, the person who could keep a room from spinning. Nia's parents were both alive then, Gareth and Moira, and they loved the idea of a stable marriage more than they ever understood the work inside it. Nia also had a brother, Callum, who lived nearby and had a habit of drifting into family problems only once there was something to fix. From the outside, we looked ordinary and solid. From the inside, the first cracks weren't loud. They were logistical. The early signs weren't the usual cliches. Nia didn't leave her phone face down and jump when I walked in. She didn't come home with perfume and excuses. She was careful, intelligent, deliberate. If anything, she became more competent, more planned, as if precision alone could prevent suspicion. It started with her evenings, not constant late nights, just a new pattern of extended appointments and emergency consults. She'd tell me in advance. She'd make it sound responsible. She'd even prepare the house before she left. Tomorrow's packed lunches, notes about Ben's library day, reminders for Lottie's practice. It was considerate on the surface, but it also cleared the runway. Then came her mood, a calmness that didn't fit tiredness. She'd come home late and still have energy for small talk, still able to ask about my day without the usual mental fog of someone truly drained. She wasn't frantic, she wasn't scattered, she was settled. Lottie noticed before I did. One evening, she asked, quietly, not accusing, why Mom was so nice lately, like she's trying. Teenagers can be brutal without meaning to be. They just say what they see. I told her people have seasons. Stress comes and goes. She nodded, but she didn't look relieved. Jude was different. He started staying out more, not as rebellion, but as avoidance. He wasn't rude. He was distant in that way older kids get when they sense tension and decide it isn't theirs to solve. Ben, though, was the one who made me feel it in my chest. He began asking simple questions with no agenda. Whether Mom would be home for his bedtime story, whether Mom liked our house, whether Mom was sad at work, little hands reaching for the edge of a truth he couldn't name. Those were the red flags that mattered, not because they proved anything, but because they showed the atmosphere changing. And I did what a lot of spouses do when they sense that shift. I worked harder to keep the machine running. I covered school pickups. I rearranged my inspections. I used favors with colleagues so I could be home early when Nia had clinic overruns. I smoothed conversations with her parents when she missed family dinners. I told my mother not to worry. I told the kids it was just work. Without realizing it, I was becoming the insulation around her choices, which is why, when the truth came, it didn't come through my effort. It came through someone else's conscience. Her name was Saffron. She worked at Nia's clinic as a receptionist and hearing aid coordinator, the person who kept the place functioning. She wasn't one of Nia's close friends in our world, but she was close enough to Nia in work life to know details that never reached me. I'd met her once at a clinic holiday event. She'd seemed friendly, normal, the kind of person who makes polite conversation and then disappears. So when she knocked on my door one Saturday afternoon, I didn't recognize her immediately. She stood on the step like someone who had rehearsed and still wasn't ready. Her hands were empty. Her face was pale, eyes fixed on a point behind me as if looking at my hallway was too intimate. She asked if she could speak to me alone. That sentence changed the temperature in my whole body. I didn't invite her in. Not out of hostility, out of instinct. I stepped outside and pulled the door mostly shut behind me, leaving the children's noise inside where it belonged. Saffron didn't waste time. She didn't soften it. She said Nia was having an affair. She said it had been going on for months. She said the man was the clinic director, Ewan. And then she did the thing that made it undeniable. She handed me her phone. On it was a short video clip taken from the clinic's back car park. Not grainy CCTV, not a distant blur. A colleague's phone, close enough to see faces, close enough to remove all doubt. Nia and Ewan standing beside a car, bodies turned toward each other like they belonged that way. Ewan's hand on her waist, Nia's mouth on his. Not a quick peck, not an accidental moment. A kiss that had muscle memory. Saffron's voice, low and shaking, said she'd recorded it because she'd started to feel complicit. She'd covered appointments. She'd watched patient slots get reshuffled. She'd watched Nia get favored in ways that weren't professional. She'd told herself it wasn't her business until it started affecting other staff, and until she realized she couldn't look at me the same way when I dropped by to collect Nia after late sessions. She said she couldn't live with it. She said she was sorry. I didn't ask to watch it twice. I didn't need to. Objective. Clear. Undeniable. I thanked her because it was the only thing I could say without making it about my pride. Then I asked why she was telling me now. Saffron looked down, swallowed, and said something that gave her story weight. She'd already resigned, and she'd already reported Ewan to the clinic's owners for unethical conduct, using clinic time and influence for personal relationships, manipulating schedules, pressuring staff into silence. She wasn't coming to me for drama. She was closing a door behind her. That was her arc, small, real, consequential. She chose discomfort over complicity and took action that would matter beyond my marriage. I didn't confront Nia that day. I didn't storm into the kitchen waving a phone. I did what my work had trained me to do when something structural failed. I stabilized what was underneath. I called my sister Priya and told her I needed her to take Ben overnight, no questions asked. She heard my voice and didn't ask for the full story first. She simply said yes. I called my mother, Elaine, and told her I needed help with school runs for a week. She didn't pry. She asked what time. Then I called Jude and asked him to come home that night, not to talk, just to be there. He arrived with that older kid's seriousness, eyes scanning my face like he already knew something was wrong and had been waiting for it to be named. By the time Nia walked in later, the house was unusually calm, not tense, prepared. I waited until the younger two were asleep. I didn't accuse. I didn't ask questions that invited denial. I told her someone from her clinic had come to the house. I told her I'd been shown a video. I described what was in it in plain language. I watched her face while I spoke, not for tears, not for guilt, but for the reflex. Deny, minimize, reframe, confess. Nia tried denial first, a soft denial, the kind that hopes your certainty isn't real. Then I told her the man's name. Ewan. That detail cut through her denial like a key turning. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, her eyes changed, and then she did something that still surprises me when I remember it. She didn't cry. She started explaining logistics, like a person trying to manage outcomes, how it started, how it wasn't meant to, how it was separate from home life, how she never intended to leave. It was careful language, constructed to reduce damage. That's when something in me became very still, because the affair wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of reality. She'd been living two lives and trusting me to maintain the first one. I didn't shout. I didn't insult her. I told her I wasn't going to compete with a life she'd already built. I told her I wouldn't expose her publicly. I wasn't interested in humiliation. But I also told her, quietly, firmly, that I would no longer protect her from the consequences of her choices. I wouldn't smooth family narratives. I wouldn't rearrange my life so her secrets stayed comfortable. I wouldn't carry the administration of her double life anymore. That wasn't a threat. It was a withdrawal. And withdrawal changes everything. The weeks that followed were the hardest in the most ordinary way. School schedules, kids' moods, money, housing decisions, the slow administrative grind of separation when you're trying to keep stable. Lottie swung between anger and numbness. Jude became protective in a way that made me both proud and heartbroken. Ben clung more to routine than to any person. Bedtimes became the battleground, not because anyone fought, but because they were the moment he felt the absence most. Nia's parents reacted in their own styles. Moira cried and tried to negotiate reconciliation like it was a misunderstanding. Gareth stayed quiet, then asked if we could handle this privately. Callum tried to be supportive to everyone at once, which meant he wasn't useful until I gave him a specific job. School pickups when my inspections ran late. Once he had a task, he showed up. On my side, Elaine was steady. Priya was steadier. They didn't demonize Nia in front of the kids. They didn't ask the children to pick sides. They just helped keep life moving. And then the clinic side of it started to shift. Not because I did anything. Because Saffron had already lit the fuse before she ever knocked on my door. The clinic owners began an internal review, staff schedules were audited, complaints surfaced, small, accumulated, suddenly validated. Ewan's influence narrowed, Naya's position changed, her work life became less comfortable, less protected. That wasn't my doing, it was gravity. All I did was stop shielding her from it. That was the quiet payback, not revenge, not theatrics. Just consequences landing where they naturally land when you're no longer cushioning them. The legal process took time, as these things do. Solicitors, financial disclosures, parenting plans, the slow movement from one household into two. There was a financial impact that nobody glamorizes. 2 rents, duplicated bills, child-related expenses that don't have just because a marriage does. I downsized. Naya did too. The kids learned the rhythm of 2 homes, which is a sentence no child ever wants to learn. The marriage ended formally after months of procedures, not a single dramatic day. And once it did, the rest of life kept going, quietly, stubbornly, as if it hadn't noticed the significance. A long time has passed since then. Jude is a grown man now. Lottie is grown too, sharp and independent. And Ben is no longer the little boy who asked if Mom liked our house. He's older, steadier, and he remembers more than he talks about. Nia and I communicate when needed. Civil, practical, limited. Time doesn't make betrayal disappear. It just moves it from a wound into a scar. Her parents' relationship with me changed. Moira stayed connected to the children and learned, eventually, not to pressure them into pretending. Gareth kept things polite once he understood I wasn't going to be bullied by privacy. Callum matured. He became a better uncle than he'd been a brother. My mother aged. My sister stayed constant. I changed jobs eventually, moving into training and compliance, less site work, more mentoring. I didn't want my life to be constant emergency management anymore. And Saffron? I never saw her again after that day, but I still remember her face on my doorstep, someone choosing to do the uncomfortable right thing before she walked away. People ask whether I'm glad the clinic consequences happened the way they did. I don't feel glad, I feel aligned, because I didn't ruin anyone. I stepped back from protecting a lie. Once I did, the rest resolved the way it always does when people can't hide behind your effort anymore. And with all this distance, that still feels like the cleanest end I could have given my children and myself. Thank you for listening. If you found this story worth hearing, please like, share, and subscribe. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in this situation. I read every one. And until next time, take care.